All right. So this is the fourth in our session series for our faculty teaching and learning fellows this fall. And we have had incredible participation. We were just talking last week, around 25 folks each time. And that's really a lot. We only have about 250 faculty, full-time faculty. So 10% of you are showing up every time. That is so exciting for us and for our presenters and our faculty teaching and learning fellows. Today, I'm going to introduce Dr. Lakesha Opara-Nadi. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Elementary and Early Childhood Education. And I want to say that Dr. Opara-Nadi and as she calls her partner in crime, Dr. Kenesha Bennett, both they both went through the mentoring program, and they really set the standard. Now, when I get new faculty that I'm working with, I'm like, they cannot beat these two because they hit the ground running, started doing their research, I mean, amazing. So I'm so excited to have her as a faculty teaching and learning fellow and have her share some of her experience and wisdom with you all. And with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Dr. Opara-Nadi.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Lakesha Opara-Nadi. And as Dr. Pizzetta just shared with you all, I am an assistant professor in the Department of Elementary and Early Childhood Education in the College of Ed. And so thank you all for joining me. Today, I will be sharing with you all about culturally responsive teaching in higher education. And with that, I will begin sharing my presentation. So today I will cover in this short amount of time what culturally responsive teaching is, culturally responsive teaching in higher education, pedagogical framework of culturally responsive teaching, recognizing different types of biases, and culturally relevant teaching strategies to use in the classroom. I'll have a couple that you could actually incorporate next week if you would like. What is culturally what is culturally responsive teaching? So culturally responsive teaching is an approach to teaching that uses students' cultural backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives as assets in learning. It creates inclusive classrooms, connects content to real life context, and promotes equity, engagement, and critical thinking. So I shared this picture because this is actually a picture of me. I'm in the middle smiling, and I'm actually at Disney Springs with a group of students from all walks of life. And our SEA president at that time, Paige Hodges, she is right there in front of me as well. And I love this picture because it shows the different cultures that make up smaller groups, and in our instances at Jackson State, larger groups. And we have to be knowledgeable of those different cultures. We have to be inclusive of them, and we have to surround ourselves with them. As you can see, I have done so in this picture. And so we have to do that with our students as well. And so that's why I think it's very important that we all be knowledgeable of what culturally responsive teaching is, the various types of it, and why we should be or including this in our teaching, in our instructions, and in our interactions with not only our students, but with faculty and everyone in the community as well. So there are several different types of pedagogical frameworks when it comes to culturally relevant teaching. Even there are several that are not even mentioned here. However, the ones that I will be referencing today are culturally relevant teaching, culturally responsive teaching, and culturally sustaining teaching. Um, Gloria Billings and Geneva Gay, they actually spearheaded culturally relevant teaching and culturally responsive teaching. They became knowledgeable that or aware that knowledge is biased depending on who's presenting the knowledge, who's writing and sharing the knowledge. There are biases. simply because as people, we are biased. We might not mean to be, we might think we're not, but we can't get away from it. We are. And so Dr. Gloria Billings and Geneva Gay, they decided to uh, do further research in this to see how we can meet the needs of our students through being culturally aware, knowledgeable, and responsive. And it's interesting because we all think we're doing that, and we're not. We should be culturally aware and responsive in curriculums, instructions, interactions with others. I do come from the K-12 setting, so a lot of things that I reference, it will come from my background. So I am not an expert in your discipline. However, I can share my experiences, which will inform or offer you guys insight into ways that you can be culturally responsive in your disciplines as well. I noticed as a classroom teacher that specifically on assessments and curriculum, the information that was assessed of our students was not familiar to them. It did not come from their backgrounds or their cultures. For example, there were assessments that brought up subways. Many of our students had never been on a subway, didn't know what it was. Brought up mountains and the elevation and the air. Students were clueless. However, they were assessed in these areas and were asked questions or shown pictures and asked them what was this. Of course, a lot of times they got them wrong, and that was held against them. And that's being culturally material, curriculum, instruction. It has to be culturally relevant. Depending on where your students are, depending on where you are, it has to be culturally relevant for them to be receptive of it. And with it being culturally relevant, us as instructors have to be culturally responsive and adapt our instruction accordingly. However, there's another scholar that suggests that not only do we need to be culturally relevant, or material or curriculum or instruction needs to be culturally relevant, and responsive, also culturally sustainable, meaning you may acknowledge my culture through your instruction. You may make mention of it, but then you go right back to teaching the same old way, teaching one size fit all. And so, I'm sorry, my light went off. However, that's what culturally sustaining um, pedagogy is. It means once you have made it relevant, once you have acknowledged it, don't just acknowledge it and step away from it. Acknowledge it and be inclusive of it. Continue to integrate other cultures of your students in your instruction. Continue to consider their backgrounds. Just not say, hey, I hear you, I see you, but let's keep going with the majority of the room. So that's what those three, culturally relevant teaching, responsive teaching, and culturally sustaining teaching, that's what those offer to instruction and can be very beneficial in many ways. Any questions? I tend to talk a lot, so please feel free to ask. So why is culturally responsive teaching important in higher education? Well, it's full circle. It connects learning to students' cultural backgrounds, promotes equity and inclusion, enhances student engagement and retention, and prepares students with critical thinking skills and cross-cultural skills. And I will elaborate on these a little further on my next few slides. So, cultural relevant or responsive teaching connects learning to students' cultural backgrounds. It validates and incorporates students' lived experiences, languages, and perspectives. Sometimes you might hear a student use the word ain't. And we're quick to say, no, no, we're at a university. We don't use that word without considering their environment that they just left, which it may have been used frequently. And although we would want to correct them, we wouldn't want to say you're wrong or don't use that, because from their environment, it's not wrong. That's how they communicate in their culture, or where they're from. And there is actually a historical context to the word ain't. And ain't actually is existed before it is. And so to not acknowledge the student, to not acknowledge their language and just say it's wrong, it's something that we shouldn't do simply because it's not wrong if that's how their family speaks, is that if that's how their culture speaks. However, we should acknowledge it. We shouldn't be dismissive of it, but we should also use that as a teachable moment to say, hey, I hear you and I know that's part of your culture, but for certain settings and for certain situations, this is how we would want to be professional. Not to say that, you know, your word is not professional, the word that you're using. However, in different environments, we just speak uh, using academic term or academically correct or however you want to structure that. And so we don't want to be dismissive. We don't want to disconnect from our students. We always want to be inclusive of them, their languages, and their backgrounds. It makes coursework more relevant and meaningful. As a student myself, if the information is not relevant nor meaningful to me, you have lost me. And you sound like Charlie Brown. I just hear you, but it's not resonating with me at all. And I use this, it's more meaningful to me today than it was when I was a undergrad and even a graduate student, simply because some classes that I took during those times, I wish I'd had really taken a more interest in it because I really needed that information. I need it now. However, it wasn't presented to me in a way that I could relate to it, or that was meaningful to me, or that I could use it in some sort of way, or that I connect with it. So making course material relevant and meaningful gives you more buy-in from your students. They'll want to come to class. They'll want to listen to your lectures. They'll want to engage. And it builds stronger connections between theory and practice. If I can understand what you're teaching me, I'm more able to apply it, and it'll make sense. And so, bringing in someone's cultures, bringing in things that they like, topics that they like, bringing in their different values, that will make the theory, what you're presenting, even if it's something outside of the norm, but relating it to them will make their application of that information much easier. Promotes equity and inclusion. It adapts instruction and assessments to diverse learning needs. It challenges biases and integrates diverse voices into curricula, and creates a classroom climate where all students feel seen, respected, and valued. Culture exists in our disciplines as well. So, not just um, from our home environments, from the countries that we are from, or the states, or our communities, but also in our academic disciplines. For example, um, I'm a music, not music. Oh my goodness, they must be talking about me. I prepare teachers, and we often get a lot of music students. However, because we're elementary ed, or I'm elementary ed, K3, K6, we have a tendency to teach to our specific area, and we were actually leaving out music students. And I recognized that. Well, actually, they went and told on me. They actually went to their dean, their chair. They went and told on me. They reported me to someone and said, they're teaching me all this elementary stuff, but we're music majors. It's not relevant to me or our community or, you know, our group of music students in the classroom. What can be done about that? And I also gave an assessment, and I found out that a lot of my music students were getting lost because they could not relate to what we were teaching to them, and we were preparing them to be music teachers. And so I actually had to make some changes to be more inclusive of my teachers, giving them more opportunities to apply their expertise and make it relevant to them and their culture, academia wise, not specifically geared towards their community outside of the university setting. Um, and they were more receptive of it. They were more engaged in the work, and they better understood the expectations of them when they went out into the field to practice as teacher, music educator students. So that's always something to consider in your specific disciplines. That's a culture in itself. geared to those specialized areas. Also, I often attend a lot of conferences that are out of state where I am the minority. And I do feel isolated because I am sometimes I'm by myself when I travel. And I often think about our students that come to us from different walks of life. They come to us from different countries, different states. And a lot of them, they're leaving home and they're coming alone only to feel isolated and not included when they arrive, only to feel like their cultures are not valued, their beliefs, their morals are not valued, their traditions are not valued. And so that can really be a disadvantage. It could be very emotional impactful. Um, and it can really hinder students' success. Students thrive where they feel welcome. Students thrive when they can connect with their instructors. And so that's something also to consider. Culturally relevance also creates a classroom climate where all students feel seen, respected, and valued. And I go back to my music students because I have a lot of fun with them. And we actually, I had one of my students, Mr. Harper, he actually led one of our lessons a couple of weeks ago. And he was thrilled, and he was one of my quiet students, but he felt included. He felt that I valued his expertise, and he did a very good job. And so I'm always seeking out ways to be inclusive of other disciplines. And I encourage you all to do the same, in addition to their cultural backgrounds from their communities, from their countries, from their uh, wherever they come from. I think I went the wrong way. I'm sorry. Culturally relevance enhances student engagement and retention. And this all goes back to say, if the students feel valued, if they feel engaged, if they feel included, if they feel welcome, they are more likely to want to stay here and complete their degree, their programs, and might return because they feel like they are welcome. The Our department actually hosted a recruitment event for different school districts to come in to, pitch their school districts and why you should come here and why you should do these things. And I won't name the school districts, but our chair asked each school district representative to share one word that made their district stand out. In one school district, very quote unquote elite school district, they shared supportive. We're very supportive, which is big, and a good one. And the students went, okay. And then another great, fantastic, fabulous school district, their district representative said, belonging. You'll have a sense of belonging. And they also shared the culture. If you want a culture that's similar to the one that you're coming from, then you want to come to this school district. And the students, their eyes, they were, oh yeah, belonging. Like, how are you going to be supportive if they don't feel like they belong? You can support me all day, but if I don't feel like I belong there anyway, I'm not going to feel like I'm included. I'm going to feel like you're supporting me to serve a role, and everyone wants to feel welcome. Everyone wants a sense of community. Everyone wants to be valued. And the students they picked up on that. And so I think they lost some students that day, but that's okay. That's okay. All are valued. All of the school districts are valued. So with that, culturally relevance also prepares graduates with critical thinking and cross-cultural skills. And to sum these three up, which number one, encourages students to analyze and challenge systemic inequalities, builds cross-cultural communication and problem-solving skills, produces equity-minded leaders ready for global and diverse workplaces. It's basically saying what we're doing here is preparing them to be inclusive and advocate for the rights of others once they leave our university. And that's what we want. We want students graduating that are inclusive, that actually carry this sense of culturally relevancy, culturally recognition, appreciation, sustainability outside of the university setting. And so that's what I encourage also as I continue my presentation. So biases, we all have them, and being culturally relevant and responsive, um, we have to, in being culturally aware and responsive, we have to recognize our own biases. And to do so, we need to know the different types. There are actually two types of biases. There is an implicit bias and there is an explicit bias. And the two are different, whether you are aware of them or not. Explicit biases are really those that you are aware of. You know you're doing it. You know you're saying hateful things. You know you're discriminating. It's clear. There's no question about it. You're aware of it. You know you're doing it. However, implicit biases are those biases you're not aware you're doing it. They're stereotypes. They're gestures that you make when certain people come around that you're not aware of. They're automatic and unintentional. Unintentional. You don't mean to do it, but you're doing it. And they are assumptions instead of facts. You're going off of past experiences, things you've read, things you've heard, instead of going off of actual factual information. And these are important to understand, especially when it comes to our students, because we often, and I know we don't mean to do it, but we often, as educators and just as people, we judge people by how we see them. Once we see them, they come into our classroom, we're already making assumptions about them. Just by how they look. Oh, they're not professionally groomed. They must not be smart. I know we shouldn't think like that, but some of us, some people do. They must come from a poor background or a great background, and it could be the reverse. However, we have to be able to understand our own biases so that we can do things to address them on the front end. So, some things that we can do, we can pause and reflect, slow down before making a decision, share about students' cultures in a manner, or be aware of them so that you can um, be receptive of them without making stereotypes or assumptions about them on the front end. For example, as a K-12 educator, we like to dance and we like to sing. And I know we do some of that here outside of the classroom, but some of us do it inside the classroom as well, like I do. And so I noticed that one of my students, they weren't engaged. And sometimes as teachers, we're quick to jump and we're quick to respond and react and say, come on, you have to do this with the class. You have to be engaged. You're a part of the class. Come to find out, her family did not allow dancing. It was a cultural thing. They did not promote or encourage dancing. So therefore, it was unfair for me to put this on this child to enforce them to do something that I wanted them to do without thinking, without getting to know them. And so you have to be careful of that, especially when we address groups collectively, um, not to let our biases show or to try to at least think before we react, think before we speak. Think about a student situation before we make comments in the classroom. Some students, we have different students coming from different walks of life. Some students are homeless. Some students are working 3 or 4 jobs. Some students they just can't, made it to your classroom. They're just now leaving a job. Some students have kids and families. And so we have to think about things we say to them because we don't know what's going on in their communities and we don't know their backgrounds. Check assumptions. People are always quick to assume things about people. For me, example, my name is Lakeisha Opara-Nadi, and people often assume because I'm an Opara-Nadi, I am Nigerian. I am not. I grew up on Pearl Street, right across the street from Blackburn. I am a Jacksonian. However, my husband is Nigerian. And so people, and I wear a lot of braids because I just love braids, but people automatically assume I'm from Nigerian. And the first question is usually, have you been back home? I'm at home, and then the next question is, are you Nigerian? No, I'm not. However, people assume that because of my name. So we have to be careful of that when our students as well. We assume students are from the same place. Because we look, similar. We may look like we're from the same place, but we're really not. I have another example for you. Back when social media, before it became very popular, um, there was this thing called MySpace, which sounds really old now. It's not old to me, but it sounds really old when I say it out loud. MySpace. And so I was, browsing the different profiles and whatnot, and I saw this gentleman on there, and he said he was Nigerian, and I said, no, he doesn't look Nigerian. And then he said, I have two Hawaiian daughters. So now you're saying you're Nigerian and you have two Hawaiian daughters. Okay. So I assumed he was just trying to impress people. He was making it up. I married his brother and I found out that he is Nigerian and he does have two Hawaiian daughters. And so, we have to be careful when we assume things of people and go with facts. I was going off of assumptions. I was going off of how he looked. I was going off on the fact that he said he lived in Jackson and he was Nigerian with two Hawaiian nieces. We have to be careful with our students the same way. That's why it's important to get to know your students, get to know where they're from. Also, flip perspective. Consider how it looks from another person's point of view. So, several people who know this about me, they know that I have some issues that I'm dealing with personally in regards to family. I have a brother, and you may have seen him. He wanders around, not on campus or whatnot, but the communities or whatnot, and he's homeless. He chooses to be homeless. I'm sharing this only because when I see him, I know that's my brother. When I see him, I know he's not violent. I know he's not, and I know he chooses to be this way. But when others see him, they automatically assume he's violent. They automatically assume he's a thief. And he's not. He's not. He's not into that. So flip the perspective and put yourself in the shoes or the seats of your students. How do they feel? How would you feel if you were sitting where they sit, and you were making us, and someone was making assumptions about you or someone you love? We have to consider that, and oftentimes we get away from that when we're teaching, simply because we're in the role of, you got to get this is what you came here to do. But there's still a connection piece that we have to remember not to ignore, not to overlook when we get to know our students. And seek evidence to get to know your students. Don't go by what you see. Don't go by what you've heard from other professors. Your experience with a student may be very different than someone else's experience with that same student. So this presentation right here, well, these are two presentations that myself and my partner in crime, Dr. Kanisha Bennett, we actually hosted. And they're very significant in different ways. The picture on the left is a group of Canton certified teachers in the Canton Public School District. And they are actually, both groups are actually completing the same activity. The activity is called If You Really Knew Me. As they entered the room, we gave each of them a blank sheet of paper, and they were tasked with creating 4 squares and writing 4 things about them that no one would know. And then they gave them back to us. We shuffled them around and we passed them out on the floor, and they just had to go around and randomly pick one up. So the group of people that are standing on the left side that are looking at the papers on the floor, they're selecting a card to pick up. And the Canton group, they work with each other every day. They discuss their families. They know each other's cultures. They know what people they like, what they don't like, what they like to eat, what they don't like to eat. And it was very easy for them to identify whose card belonged to who, because they knew them. And it was fun, and they laughed because, they would pick up the card and say, oh yeah, I know who did, who likes this. Oh yeah, I know this is such. And they were correct. Now, the group on the right, they are certified K-12 teachers from around across the state. They didn't know each other, and we completed the same activity with them. And it was interesting because each one of them were actually using assumptions and stereotypes to pair their cards with the person who they thought it was a match to. And it was funny, it was fun, but it brought back the realization that if you don't know your students, if you don't know people, you will make mistakes. You will assume things about them. And you know what people say, if you assume people, you make out of yourself. A lot of times you do. However, in this instance, it was fun, but it might not be so fun if your students are on the back end of that, receiving those stereotypes, receiving those assumptions, and you are supposed to be their mentor or whatnot. So this was a fun activity. And it really brought to light that getting to know your students, getting to know their cultures, making their cultures relevant in your instruction is very important. So I want you to try this. No, you do not have to speak. I do ask that you put something in the chat, or just if it pops up in your mind, just think it. I'm going to show a word at a time, and I just want you, whatever pops to your mind or comes in your mind, the first thing, just type it in the chat. So, first word, soda. Second word, music. Third word, professional basketball player. Okay, so I'm looking in the chat and I am getting some interesting things that people like. However, just as quickly as you shared what you like when you saw those words, though, you do the same thing with your students. You just shared your preferences, what you like, what you associate with those words. And someone might have said Sprite. Well, I don't like Sprite. I like Coke, but that's the same way with your students. They're not a one size fit all. We have to know them. We have to get to know them individually. And I know some of you are saying, I have 40 students. How am I going to get to know them individually? I have 60. I'm online. That's impossible. I get you. I hear you. However, there are things that you can do. Quick things that you can do, and I only have one or two to share with you today, that you could do to be inclusive of your students. Before I share those things, let's just look at some data. We often see people as black and white, black group, white group. However, there are 104 white groups, individual with their own cultures, with their own backgrounds, with their own contributions, 62 black or African American groups, and 22 other race groups. So everything is not always black and white. And same with our classrooms. These different groups are coming to our classrooms, and oftentimes we don't know until they speak, because they may look black, they may look white, but then they speak and you find out they have this beautiful accent that is not from here, or I'm assuming it could be here, because a lot of people think that my daughter is British, and she's not, because she sounds like Peppa Pig, but she's not. However, that's how it's easy to assume things about people. But there are multiple groups, and they're coming to us, coming in our classrooms, and we have to be able to relate to them and to allow them to represent themselves and to be inclusive in our environments. This is actually Jackson State's data, and I pulled this from institutional research. It's posted right now if you want to double check behind me. However, we have students from all different states across the country. Yes, we have more from Mississippi. However, that doesn't mean we can teach everyone as if they're from Mississippi. If you look at this, and this is just not the only list, there are other states, some more so than others. Also, different countries. And some of you might say, well, it's not a lot of people, but do you know who they are and where they are? This is not specific as to the programs they're in. They may be sitting in your classroom. However, you haven't gotten to know your students. Well, I know you all have, because you all are here and you all listening to this wonderful presentation. But for those of you that are not, some of you may be excluding some great cultural um, contributions that can be made to your classes. So, of course, we have a huge African American or Black population, but we also have Asians, Hispanics, multiracial. Um, we have a wealth, a collective different cultures um, amongst our student body. So we have to make sure that we are culturally aware and that we are creating lessons and instructions and teaching to be culturally inclusive. So what can you do? These are three different young girls, three little girls. One of the little girls, her name is Mamie Tape. She's 9 years old, and she is an Asian American, or Chinese American. I'm sorry. Sylvia Mendez. She's Hispanic American. And then, does anyone know who that third little girl is? I already saw it in the comments. That is Ruby Bridges. Why is this significant? Of course, I'm from the K-12 background, so I had to relate it to what I know. However, why is this important? It's important because all three of these little girls made a significant contribution to the integration of schools. However, we are really most familiar with Ruby Bridges. And so, we see the Ruby Bridges books. It's a book on each one of these young girls. Of course, Ruby Bridges and Sylvia Mendez, they are still living, and they are still doing interviews. However, we are really more aware of Ruby Bridges. But all cultures, we forget to be inclusive of each one of these cultures and how they made significant contributions to integrating schools. So I just use this as an example to show we tend to focus solely on what we know and what we are comfortable with. It'll be great to network and communicate with other faculty from different cultures across our university or our campus to be more inclusive of not only our faculty but of our student body, and so that we can include all walks of life and respect and value all contributions to what areas we're teaching and just to the university as a whole. So what can you do? Because I know you're saying, or you're asking, well, you said you were going to show us something. What can I do? This right here is a Padlet, and it has absolutely nothing to do with culturally relevant teaching. However, I could not change it because it's a live Padlet. And Padlet it's one of those AI tools. It's wonderful. I love it. But we often in the beginning of the year ask our students to complete a all about me discussion questions. Tell something about yourself, and then responding to your classmates. In the same way I'm saying it and sharing it, our students are reading it and saying, okay, let me do this again. It's the same thing. Some of them are just copying and pasting their responses from one class to the other just to share a little bit about themselves. This allows students to share more about themselves, and it provides them options as to how they would want to do so. If they want to record a video, they can. If they want to just do audio, I found this interesting because I also discovered that several of my students have self-esteem issues. And me knowing that, I know I'm not going to put them on the spot. I'm not going to force them to do something that makes them uncomfortable. With Padlet, you can pose a question about, ask your students to share something with their class, their peers, and with you. And these are some of my students about themselves. And some chose to do a video. They can respond to each other. And I, as the teacher, would go in also and comment on their videos. They could make them anonymous. They can just choose to share it with you. However, it gets away from just doing the same old all the time and allowing them to have a choice in how they want to share what they want to share, and for their peers to go in, because they can go in as well and listen to these videos as they share about themselves. And that's me. I commented on a student and said nicely done. So you could share with a gift. And I also found that a student made an interesting point. So I found a video that supported what she was sharing. And you can also share articles, whatever you want to share with your students. And you can bring this up in class. And it also gives you the option to create an actual slideshow where you could share as a video presentation for your students. So this is a wonderful way to share. And also with Padlet, again, assessment polls and MTSS has nothing to do with what we're discussing today. However, this is also live and I could not change the content, but this is a way to poll your students on things they like. You can form your questions to be as specific as you want. What do you do? How would you present this? What could we do to be more inclusive of your culture in class? What expertise would you like to share? And this is anonymous and it shows you how many students have voted, and you can go back and pull the data and just use that to inform your instruction. So with that, I have actually come to the end of my presentation. I thank you all for being attentive and joining me, as I do love to ramble sometime, but I'm energetic and I just love to engage, and I love to share things that I am knowledgeable of. Again, thank you. I am Dr. Lakeisha Opara-Nadi, Assistant Professor in the Department of Elementary Early Childhood Education in the College of Ed, and I thank you for joining me on this wonderful Friday.
Thank you, Dr. Opara-Nadi. We did have a few questions in the chat, but and in addition, I'd love for people to kind of talk about what they have done to be inclusive of students. Let's see if I can scroll. There's a lot of talking in the chat. That's great. Let's see, Dr. Ko. Okay, he asked about the cultures at JSU. So maybe we should talk about equity and inclusion, and we'll get to you just next, Dr. Hernandez. Equity and inclusion, that's, we're facing some challenges with that, but I love the fact that you talk about it as it's not just this race-based thing. It's more about the whole person. So how do you recommend faculty talk about that in their classrooms so that they're not getting in trouble with the, equity inclusion police out there? So
That's a great question, because we are tiptoeing around that ourselves, believe it or not. Um, we try to address it best we can. I do not have the right answer right now because of the environment we're in right now. All I can say is it's important to do so. If you have to do that on an individual basis, on a personal basis, and just a one-on-one with your students, not to do it collectively. But again, knowing your students is key. So do I have a yes, no, do this? I do not, unfortunately. However, I do know how important it is to be inclusive and to be um, allow equity and equitable opportunities for your students.
absolutely. Dr. Hernandez, you had a question.
Yes, so not to brag, but I've been dealing with this issue all my life. Well, not only from a personal perspective, but an academic perspective, dealing first with DMC, disproportionately minority content, especially in the juvenile justice system, in the child welfare system, etc. But I'm not going to talk about 30 years of my research. But so I do teach a class in social work at the master's level about cultural competency. And I'm also in the task force for to create for the at the national level for the National Association of Social Workers, the revisions of the update of our standards for cultural competency. And trust me, I can talk forever, and Dr. Picera knows that. So, but I don't know, because I got in a little late. The thing is that even the term cultural competency is a little outdated. And that's part of the struggle and the issues that we're dealing as the committee, which is a national committee from people from all over the United States that are trying to update and rewrite the standards for social work. I can end the question there, but just to give you a little bit more info, there's such issues or terms now that are cultural humility, that are becoming, you know, extremely relevant and very visual. Self-awareness. I used to, when in another class, I used to teach, and the image of cultural competency was an iceberg. And you know about the iceberg, not the Titanic joke. It's about how much is below the surface. So we really don't understand or see the bigger part of cultural competency, hence the image of an iceberg. Self-awareness, knowledge, skills, attitude. So I guess I'm curious because, I'm also selfish since I'm working on this project, which is, and especially hearing from some faculty from any division. What are your thoughts about the current sort of definition and state of cultural competency? For instance, if you want me to lead the witness, so to speak, some of our standards are in the hiring, in the education, in the advocacy. And I'm really done now.
So to understand, for clarity on my end, you're asking how or what are our feelings in regards to culturally competencies
Yeah,
in the work.
the recent one, not from 10 years ago. How, for you, how have this definition or even practice have changed to what it is today? Which I think you cover a lot in your presentation, but maybe in a little bit of a blur, or I say blur in the sense of, when at the back of the book you get a blur of something, and comment.
Well, my response to that would be being intentional um, in regards to any practices that include others. I have an example for that. I've just found out that several districts are changing policies that are addressing different areas in their handbooks that are outdated in regards to culturally inclusion, regarding dress, regarding religions, appreciation or awareness or whatnot. And so I guess it just depends on um, the entity and how they address those issues specifically. It's kind of hard to discuss again, like I said, because of the environment we're in and whatnot. So to specifically go into it, I'm going to stray away from unless we can have a one-on-one. However,
I would like that, by the way.
yes, sir. That would be my approach. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I did mention there are different variations of culturally relevancy, culturally deficits, culturally literacies. And so you just brought out some as well. So I would love to meet with you to, learn more about your research and just bounce ideas off of each other's heads.
I'm
Dr.
also,
Opara-Nadi. Oh,
oh,
sorry.
I was going to say, I also work with with disabled data, and that's a whole new ball of wax
Yeah.
because they get discriminated left and right, and it's almost not almost it had happened that because I'm dealing with health issues, because that's the data, it might be lethal almost for them to be discriminated.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Dr.
agree with
Garza?
you.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Dr. Opara-Nadi.
Hi, Dr. Garza.
I just wanted to also add here about like the shift of cultural competency from the lens of an educator, having worked in early childhood education. I feel that for a very long time, the lens of cultural competency was very like small, and it was like, oh well, if you have books that are representative of your student population, like you're culturally competent. If you have books that represent the disabled population, you're culturally competent, right? But I really feel that the huge shift here should be like Dr. Hernandez was talking about, towards advocacy work and really being very intentional about inclusion. So like as a teacher, if I did have a student who, could not dance, like you mentioned, like that I made sure that my activities catered to that student as well, or that I planned an activity that was very mindful. So yeah, I just feel like as we're moving forward and as we become a little bit more like aware of truly the depth of cultural competency, that we're not just paying a lip service by saying like, oh, here's a picture and you're represented in the book, because that's not really enough, right? That's just like, that truly is, if there's a smaller tip to the iceberg, that's what I'm referring to there. But I just wanted to add a little bit to that conversation, and thank you for leading this. It was so good.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that goes back to the culturally sustainability. Like you said, they think that they are including it because they have a book on a culture or they have a picture up. But no, you've acknowledged it. Okay, we know you're aware of it, but you need to fully be inclusive of it, and include it through your instruction, include it through your delivery. So I agree with you 100%. I agree with both of you guys, you and Dr. Hernandez.
And I want to point out, Dr. Myrie has posted a lot in the chat just about how embedded bias is in everything, in materials, in the testing, and just it really is incumbent upon us as instructors to kind of look at the materials we're using and say, okay, I see something that I'm just taking for granted because it's a very Eurocentric point of view. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Opara-Nadi, if you could share with me or share in the chat the links to Padlet and the other tool that you were using, and we will also put those links on our website for anybody who wants to go back and play with them, try them out, because I love the Padlet idea. Terrific. Any other questions or comments? All good.
Dr.
All
Bezetta,
right.
may I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Good. Well, will soon be afternoon, everyone. I am Kanisha Bennett, assistant professor in the Department of Elementary and Early Childhood Education, aka Dr. Opara-Nadi's partner in crime. And so I just wanted to, I guess, kind of brag on her in the sense of, before meeting her, I think not necessarily unintentionally, there are a lot of things that I was doing as an early childhood teacher to somewhat speak to the various cultures of the students that I had. However, I will say it was not until I met Dr. OP and we started doing a lot of collaboration and work together that she truly helped me to take a step back and look at my teaching practices and strategies and how intentional I was being in this setting, in this higher ed setting, and preparing future early childhood educators on understanding what their responsibilities are as it relates to being culturally inclusive. And so I hope today everyone saw just how passionate she is about this work and how she has truly transformed the mindset within our department and our thinking and our strategies towards teaching. And so I did want to just brag on her and also thank her for her efforts. And I hope everyone today received those same sentiments.
And
That's all.
ditto, I ditto to Dr. Bennett. I don't have enough time, but ditto.
This is what it's all about: collaborating, learning from each other, and supporting each other. I know everyone has to go. We try to get finished 5 minutes before. We will post the recording, any resources that Dr. Opara-Nadi wants to share on the website. And we'll also send out a follow-up email. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you all have a good weekend. I'm planning to spend it in the hammock grading papers. So try to have a little fun while I'm grading. All right, everyone. We will see you next week. We have another AI on ramp. I can't wait to share with you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.